Dr. Wollman, thank you for being here.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you for being part of this outreach to the UJC. People are desperately trying to connect with each other and learn from each other and see what's going on with each other. And I appreciate you taking the time to share how COVID-19 has changed, altered your practice and your work as a physician. So tell me what it is that you do on a normal basis before COVID 19 and even now in the COVID 19 time.
Well, on a normal basis, I had a fairly organized, routine schedule that consisted of caring for individuals who had recently been in a hospital, what we call post-acute care. These are people who might have been in the hospital for a medical illness such as pneumonia, congestive heart failure, stroke, as well as people who have had orthopedic injuries. And then in addition, many people who had elective orthopedic procedures, people who are otherwise well, but maybe suffering from osteoarthritis and requiring knee replacement or a hip replacement.
Are
In
these
addition to that,
are these patients at home? Or are they in a
yeah,
nursing?
these are patients who are admitted to a short-term rehabilitation unit, which in the state of Connecticut, the majority of those locations are in skilled nursing facilities, nursing homes. Um, Many facilities have dedicated short-term rehabilitation units. Some intersperse the rehabilitation patients with the other population of patients in a nursing facility, which is another part of my work, which is caring for people who live in a nursing facility on a long-term basis. And those are individuals who, because of either physical frailty or for progressive cognitive deterioration, they require ongoing nursing care. And that's the majority of my clinical work. In addition to that, I also attend patients at Griffin Hospital for palliative and geriatric consultations. And those are patients in a hospital who require additional guidance on clarifying what their goals of care are, or focusing on symptom management, or especially for patients who obtain a geriatric consultation, coming up with a complex plan of care that incorporates all of their needs along with all of their medical conditions. Now, layered on top of that, I run the educational program for the Danbury Hospital internal medicine program. So those are medical residents, and I run the geriatric rotation for those residents, as well as the residents at Griffin Hospital. So while I'm providing care that I just described, I also have residents that I'm teaching. And if that's not enough, I also teach at the Frank Netter School of Medicine at Quinnipiac, where I'm the block coordinator for the neurology and psychiatry course and a few other courses there. So a pretty busy, very organized, not rigid, but organized schedule that has been my life for at least almost 2 decades now.
Wow, you are a busy man. You are a busy man. So, Dan, how have you seen your work change with this new COVID 19 shelter in place? What's happened?
Right. I could go back to early February because that's really when this first, we started hearing about it and when it actually first started to affect my work. So in early February, my wife Debbie and I took a trip to Singapore. Um, it was before there were really any report. I think that was before we had any well-reported cases in the United States. We knew that there were cases in Wuhan, China, and there were a few cases uh, under 100, certainly under 100 cases in Singapore. Um, and I actually got a fair amount of pushback from the organizations with whom I work about whether that was advisable, whether that was a risk that I might myself become sick. But I felt that at that point, we did not have any guidance whatsoever from the CDC or from any regulatory body that travel was specifically being recommended against. Now, we took extreme precautions. We wiped down our seats on the airplane. When we got to Singapore, they were already scanning people for temperature checks and asking, "Are you sick?" I mean, they were really um, checking to limit the spread. Hotel, same thing. Everywhere we went, temperature checks, wipe downs. Very few people wearing masks, only about 10% of the population. And we, in particular, very mindful about not touching things and washing our hands all the time. Going down very steep elevators, I kind of put my hands like this, just not to touch the handrails of the escalator. But anyway, and when we got back, everyone was noticeably, taking that extra step back from me, an unconscious automatic social distancing, which is probably was a good thing. But that all sort of dissipated over the next couple of weeks. Then we had another trip planned to visit our daughter Caroline in Colorado. Now, at that point, that was in mid-March, early March. At that point, we already had an outbreak at the nursing facility in Washington. And that raised even more concern among my organizations. Again, everybody really kind of pressuring me to cancel my trip. And this was, again, outside of any kind of guidance from CDC or Department of Public Health. So what I will say is that I was mindful of these issues then, and I would probably in about this, maybe by March 10th, certainly March 15th, we received guidance in the nursing facility from the Department of Public Health about how to screen people from entering the nursing facility. And that involved asking if they went to China. I, at that point, had already started my own more restrictive screening process. And I told everyone, I said, it's not just China, it's Washington. You need to screen people from anywhere there's been a documented outbreak of COVID-19. I said, secondly, especially in older individuals, fever is not necessarily a presenting sign of illness, meaning people can be quite ill and have no fever whatsoever. So I put in place in both of my nursing facilities where I'm medical director, a policy that said, number one, people are screened for wherever they've been. And the question is not, have you been to China? Because that would have failed to capture anyone who had traveled possibly to a region where COVID-19 was already spreading. Secondly, I implemented policies that any patient who demonstrated any sign of whether it be a respiratory illness, gastrointestinal illness, so people with a cough, people with any signs of nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea, that those individuals should be considered infectious for something.